Hey everybody, Mary Fran Bontempo here. And before we get started with today's show, I just wanted to let you know that my new book, From Broken to Brilliant, How to Live a Brilliantly Resilient Life, is available on Amazon. Super excited about this book, which provides a roadmap of how to live a brilliantly resilient life. You'll get advice not only from me, but from so many dozens of our podcast guests who were kind enough to share their tips on how to reset, rise, and reveal your own brilliance. So head on over to Amazon, get a copy of the book From Broken to Brilliant, and now let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. What's your train wreck? Everyone has one. The question is, are you just visiting or are you going to live there? I'm Mary Fran Bontempo. Join me and let's learn how to come through those train wrecks, not broken, but brilliant. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. I'm your host, Mary Fran Bontempo, and today I have a lovely new friend from across the pond. Victoria Lenormand is a former police detective and a founder of Gemini Directions. With 28 years in public service, Victoria now supports families and individuals navigating challenges in the health, education, and justice systems. Victoria, thank you so much for joining me. Oh, wait, and she's also the author of The Magic of Not Fitting In. We have to get
Thank
that
you.
in there because
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
that is that I sometimes I felt like that pretty much my whole life. But now there's somebody to help me. Yay.
Oh, wonderful.
So thank you so much for joining me. So 28 years as a police detective, and now you are into holistic healing and helping families advocate systems. I mean, talk about two opposite. Are you a Gemini? I have to ask you if by birth you're a Gemini.
Yeah, I am a
You are?
Gemini.
So am I.
Absolutely. You know how we hold that space of all and everything? Yeah, there you go.
So that does account for some of that, I think.
I
So
agree. Yeah.
how did you, let's just talk about your backstory a little bit. How did you go from 28 years as a police detective to the work that you are doing now? What did you see that moved you in that direction, along with your personal story?
Well, it was a career in investigation. So I've been investigating for like 28 years, and whether that was directly for law enforcement or um, other agencies that kind of pin onto it a little bit. They sort of attach themselves. They have common ground. So for me, the common ground was around financial crime, money laundering, and then taxation and bits and pieces like that. So I had a very broad career of investigating over 28 years. And in that period of time, I'm also doing what everybody else does and getting married and having children. And my youngest child came along and gave me the gift of autism. Not always a gift, not always seen as a gift straight away, certainly wasn't for me. I was very confused and went back to my roots as an investigator to say, what's going on here? And I was finding increasing dissatisfaction with the answers I was being given, and that was from the health sphere and from the education sphere. So the reason for the diagnosis was because education required it. They required an explanation for this child that was behaving differently, ergo, in order to be able to meet his needs. That's how it was initially put to us, is that he's going to have different needs. We think he's got different needs. I didn't realize how exclusionary that would become. And that was that really did play into the investigator that I am, to say, well, how did we get here?
Hmm.
How did we get to a point where a 3-year-old boy is being rejected by nursery and school when he's just learning? I mean, I think that's what childhood's for, is for learning.
Mhm.
So I'm suddenly battling in a system that is valuing the system over the child. And that was a big wake-up call to
Hmm.
me, when I could suddenly see threads in health, education, and justice that were behaving in the same way. And I realized how harmful that is, not necessarily the intention at the outset, but was certainly showing itself now, and we needed to do something about it. That's why I pivoted and shifted, because he was in need, and I wasn't going to get it anywhere else. I was going to have to do it myself.
It's fascinating to me to hear what you said about valuing the system over a child. And
Mm,
and I will say, for whatever reason, because I have two grandsons who have been diagnosed with autism as well. I will say that it seems to be more prevalent, or else we're more aware, or I don't know what the actual scenario is.
mm,
But to your very valid point, these kids don't fit into the traditional systems for learning, which doesn't mean they can't learn. It's just that they learn differently.
that's it.
And we don't know how to accommodate that.
That's right. Our current systems, I would say, don't currently adopt that or accommodate that, as you beautifully say. It's they can't accommodate that. Our children don't fit. That magic of not fitting in, they don't fit the narrative. So we have to create another narrative. And the language around that other narrative, I think, has become so destructive. It's not necessarily the most supportive it could be for a child at a point where they're at peak development. They're trying to develop and they're trying to learn. If a child constantly learns no, 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 we understand psychologically what that does, but we're not looking at the fact that our systems are doing this, trying to get the child to fit
Hmm.
in trying to get them to fit because they must fit the system because it's rather expensive to be outside of system. And
Hmm.
that is the barrier I keep coming up against is cost and will. There's a will to do it, and
Yeah.
but then there's a lack of cost, there's a lack of finance, or there's the money to do it and there's a lack of will. So
And that's an interesting point to raise because I also have a son-in-law who is a teacher.
amazing.
And I think he said last year in his classroom, he had 17 IEPs, which I don't know if you use the same terminology, but it's a
Individualized education plans, yeah,
individualized education plan, correct.
amazing.
And from that aspect, as someone who has an education degree, I thought, oh my gosh, how does he do that? So these are very real
Problems.
problems
Yeah.
that, there's a tendency, I think, to say, well, they're wrong or they're wrong. And I think at this point, it's not who's wrong.
I couldn't agree more. It's not a case of who's right. I'm hearing teachers like I have friends that are teachers, so I can't have a career in law enforcement without doctors, nurses, friends as teachers. We tend to kind of come together an awful lot and support each other through the changes that we're all meeting. Although
Right.
all those difficulties and nuances that show up in our individual practices, they tend to echo across the systems that are in place to serve the community. But that's the bit I think we lost sight of is that the system is in place to serve the community. When the
Right.
community shows itself to be diverse, the system can't respond if it remains the way it is. Now, teachers know that, police officers know that, doctors and nurses know that. So, where's the communication falling down? This was the investigator in me saying, where's the communication falling down? Because I know it, my buddy knows it, my friends know it. Why are we still here?
Hmm.
All these years later, still fighting for the teacher to be heard that 17 children with individual needs in a classroom is not something I can meet as an individual. That's more than reasonable. Exactly the same as it is for me to say that actually this system doesn't suit my child. I'm going to find something different for them. Now, what's the difference? What different things are available? Have we got Montessori? Are we Steiner schools? Where are we with what's available for my child? Special educational needs, specialist education, are we there? Well, apparently not because there's no disability for learning. It's the environment that's the problem. So we're going to pull him into our own environment and home educate. But still, the communication comes from that higher level. So certainly in the UK, I don't know if it's the same across the pond, but certainly in the UK at the moment, the narrative that's being presented is parents pulling their children out of school are irresponsible and lazy, and the children themselves lack resilience. And
Yes.
when I saw the title of your podcast, I thought, oh, this is just so perfect because let's talk about what resilience is, because it's not torture. And if our children and teachers and service providers are being they're unable to meet this. That needs to be heard. If a child is in trauma in that environment, it's not for us to critique their resilience. It's for us to meet the need.
Oh, I love that. That really sums it up in a way that is new, I think. And what I see, especially in my grandchildren, is the resilience that those kids have to have every single day to navigate a world that doesn't necessarily compute in their brains the same way it does with neurotypical people. The
Yes.
amount of resilience that they need is so it's not a lack of resilience. It's the application of that resilience that people don't see or understand.
Yes,
And
I've equated it with people in a similar way to say, if I'm an English speaking person and this is a French speaking person, there is absolutely no good me standing there shouting at them in English. There's no point whatsoever. And I'm essentially doing that when I have a neurodivergent person and I'm, neurotypical, as far as I'm aware, I'm neurotypical. My child is speaking to me and demonstrating things in a language which is unusual to me. It's incumbent upon me to learn that language and meet the need. So, as a parent, I need to do that, as our systems need to evolve to meet that if we want to support parents staying in the workplace and all the other narratives that are coming out there. So, it's, my husband and I both ended up leaving quite lucrative careers that we'd spent a lifetime building in order to bring our youngest son back from crisis at that point. So this wasn't a lack of resilience, as you say. This was a genuine inability to be in that environment. That's not a lack of resilience. That is, I've more than tried it, and it's destroying me. So I
Mhm.
don't fit here, and I want to die is something I think I would have been highly criticized if I hadn't listened to as a parent and been concerned about. And yet, when you bring it into the education environment or the health environment, their health responses, well, they're neurodivergent. They all have mental health issues. And I'm thinking, well, it's a big blanket statement. I'm lost with that. In the first instance, if we know it's a big problem, where are we on this problem? Where are we on the resolution to this problem? Because we can't just leave them as you're neurodivergent, ergo you're going to have mental health issues. Where are the tools to help them in the way that they need support, the same as everybody does if they're struggling with their mental health? Where's the tools? They can't just be ignored because the neurodivergence is there. We don't understand it enough to meet the tool. I didn't understand what the purpose was behind that. And this was a big issue for me, is that how do I help a child when none of my systems are in place to be able to help me help him? I
and
can't do that.
well, that's the key. And again, I want to emphasize that we're not necessarily blaming these systems
No,
because they
no.
are in place for a reason. You have to have
Yes,
systems in order to serve a community, serve the
yes,
population. You have to have that. But I think what happens is there's an attachment to those systems because they've worked for a
yes,
period of time. So the changing of it is seismic in some ways. And I get that. I get that there's a challenge. But the thing that I like about what you talk about making space when the default is to push through things and managing these crisis things with calm and asking better questions.
yes.
So, how do we manage to start to change this? And it's going to be small incremental changes. It's not going to be massive because that doesn't usually happen when you're trying to change a clunky system that's been in place for a long time. But how do we start? Where do we begin to tweak these systems so that they serve the broader needs of the community?
Yeah, I think we can diversify our systems the way to echo the diversity that we're actually seeing in our communities. So the one size fits all model for policing, for example, if I speak about it from that perspective, I could go to, say, a domestic argument. There could be a policy around this domestic argument, around the children, around the family, around safeguarding, around all these things. And it can give me information. But whenever I attend an incident, I need to take it on face value as to what is actually there, which may not tick all of those boxes required by the system. It doesn't mean it doesn't need my attention. It just means it might need it in a different way. So, where our systems could first learn is to learn how to flex, how
Hmm.
to let go, just a tad, just let go and inquire and explore. It's the bit I think we're missing at the moment. And it was certainly present historically. We've had it, we've had that ability. If we don't want to treat everybody as if they're the same, and I don't believe we do. I really don't believe we do. I don't believe our systems mean to do that in any way,
Right.
shape, or form. I just think it's a default position that has happened over time as we get comfortable with something. That happens for all of us, doesn't it? When we find comfort, we don't really want to come out of it. So it's kind of to step out of that just a little bit, just flex and allow a little bit. Say, let's just see what we have here and what can happen. Where is this child thriving? Is there an ability to watch, for example, with a child where they're thriving? The same as I'd stand back from domestic and look at what it's going to need to thrive and move forward rather than be stuck where it is. And that to me is the resilience key. That's the key, is to be able to take that step back and flex a little and be resilient to whatever's coming up at that particular point. So can you move with it? Can you observe it? Can you learn from it? And then you move forward. Then you either develop something new for people who respond in this way, or you're learning something new, which is that's the resilience part, is not being able to just follow the line. It's being able to test it a little bit to
And the
say, does this
interesting thing,
work?
I think, too, in the educational system, I have a degree in education, and they talk about the different ways of learning. So
Yeah,
it seems to me that there's already that awareness. It just needs to be broadened a little bit. It needs to be
absolutely.
broadened to say, okay, let's add this to that,
Hmm.
to that model that we already have. Let's add
Yes,
this. And to your earlier point, recognize that not everything's going to apply in every situation.
absolutely. And that's okay. That
Right.
is absolutely okay. We need to be okay with that as well. That not, this is a trial thing. When a child presents as leaving the parent returning to work, whether that's in a nursery setting or a more school type setting, they're learning. So they're at that base level of learning. Now, how do they learn? I would have said, like, is the first question. If you're managing a classroom as a teacher with a whole bunch of very different learners, my hat goes off to you in the first instance because I have two in my house that learn differently, and I find that challenging, and that's
Right.
enough. So if you've got these different domains of learning, along with different ability, why do we group children by age? I think Sir Ken Robinson asked this question
Hmm.
a while ago, and it rang the same with me, is that why do we group children by age rather than interest and ability, which might actually be a better environment for the teacher and a better environment for the child? Because you haven't got to look at buy-in for every lesson. You're looking at integrating the lesson with where their learning is. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I also feel that there are additional opportunities there when you bring perhaps older children together with younger children to teach and learn from each other. I know my husband's a soccer coach for a college, a university nearby, and he makes it a point to try to have a younger person with some kind of special needs as a kind of a mascot for the team every year. And it not only does it help the younger person, but it gives the older men an opportunity to see how someone else is functioning in the world and how they can, first of all, help that, and second of all, learn from it. If the only learning that comes out of it is, hey, there are a lot of differences in people, and I have to be a little more understanding and patient.
Absolutely. Even if it's only that, but also haven't we got that brilliant level of learning where if you can teach something, you know it really well. And you're kind of checking the knowledge. It's a really lovely way, I think, of checking the knowledge. It happened in my son's Montessori schooling, but it only went up to a certain age, and it was such a shame. But the Montessori model had a very similar thing, which was the older ones are supporting the younger ones, and the younger ones are, and this you've suddenly got this crossover of ages and a crossover of learning. So the older ones are demonstrating what they know to the younger ones, demonstrating their learning. And you're still on hand to be able, as the adult support, you're still on hand to be able to A, support that, and B, correct it if needs be, of you've misunderstood something. It's so much easier and flowy, I think, in that environment. Our environments are quite rigid. And
Yes.
the more rigid they become, the less flexible. My thoughts are that it needs to go the other way. Less rigidity, more flexibility to bring the resilience that, we don't, if we're not flexible, we can't demonstrate resilience. We just follow a line. We're just going to keep following a line. And when you fall off of the line, because life happens, you fall off of the line, you've got nowhere else to go because you've never tested it. So testing it at a young age in the safe place of learning, which is what it's supposed to be, isn't it? It's that lovely safe place of come in here, make mistakes. This is the time. Make them, learn
Yes.
from them, and and move them forward in the way that you do, and learn that you can rely on yourself. You've got additional skills here that you're developing the whole time. We don't develop them from the comfort place. We develop them through the hard, through the rough stuff. And it's like, here it comes. This is where it is. I say to
Yeah.
my son all the time, it's courage is not the absence of fear. It's doing it in spite of being a little afraid. At times, it's perfectly reasonable to be scared, more than reasonable. In fact, high level of intelligence at times, that's a scary situation. I understand. So how do we break it down to work through it? And when we work through that anxiety and that fear and that worry, look at how great you feel when you come out of the other end. There's your resilience. That's where it is. And you reward them with it and they know they've got it.
So, is there a level of, just to turn this on its head a little bit, is there a level of fear within the community that creates the systems of releasing that,
Yeah, I
of
think so.
releasing that
Yeah.
structure? Because, hey, here's what we're supposed to do. We have our marching orders, so to speak. So here's what we're supposed to do. And if suddenly that goes away, what do we do? Like, what do we do with all these kids? So how is there a level of fear there, number one? And number two, how do we begin then to institute these smaller changes in a practical, again, so it has to be incremental way to
Mhm.
allow for the growth of this system to accommodate the community?
Yeah, I think it just comes back to our values, isn't it? When we're going back into a school environment, the whole purpose of school is to learn how to think and how to grow and how to discover yourself. And I think there are too many of our younger people over the last sort of couple of decades that are coming out not necessarily knowing who they are,
Hmm.
much less what they want to do. So if we focus there to start with in those early years of like, who are you? And making that okay. Can we do that? Can we make it okay that you are who you are? And we can then help you rub along with your community aside you, regardless of age. It doesn't just have to be in your peer group here, but regardless of age, can we rub along against, with each other? And you learn in a moving place, and that's perfectly okay. So let's put you in a moving environment. Maybe your sports, maybe and you learn this way. This is your natural domain of learning. So we're going to build on that. Not that we're going to ignore all the other domains, but let's work with your strengths first so you feel good about yourself before we start picking you apart and saying, well, you're not very good at this and you're not very good at that. And that sounds overly negative, and I really don't mean it in that way. But I just think you have to put the foundation building in first before you start critiquing. And I'm not sure that we do that at the moment. If we could change something early, I think that nurseries don't need to look like they're getting ready for the next school until maybe a month before the next school, or nurseries certainly don't need to look like they're getting ready for university, which was the conversation I was having about my 4-year-old. And I'm thinking, well, it's gone mad. It's gone a little bit. He's 4. Can we just focus on 3, 4, 5? Let's just focus on that. Yes, there will be different abilities in every child. There will be the natural academics, absolutely natural sports people, natural musicians, and bring those skills up. These are all very valuable learning areas. There's not one I don't think is more valuable than the other. I'm a huge advocate for the arts, and I think there's so much learning. to be had there, that we don't need to be cutting budgets and suggesting that it's worth less than math. So the child that's autistic feels less than straight away because the math is tough. Do you see, I just don't think our system is communicating intentionally and with a caring way. It's communicating in a rigid way. And we could do with
Mm.
removing that language for the benefit of teachers and students. I don't think it's kind for teachers either. The Ofsted, ticky box exercise for how they're grading schools. It just scares me thinking, well, no wonder our teachers are encouraged to grade students because they're being graded themselves on, it's really not serving and unkind in its current format. So the diversity that we're experiencing in our communities needs to be echoed, I think, in our education system first, because it's spilling out into our communities, currently unchecked, unsupported, and othered. And when you other things, you ostracize them. When you ostracize them, they're on the fringes, you end up with policing problems, health problems, and everything else that comes from that. So we're better when we're together.
And to that very valid point, well, first of all, in my first grade classroom, I went to a Catholic school in the U.S. and we had 72 children
Whoa.
and one little nun in the front of the classroom. So how that poor soul managed every day, and so at that alone requires the discipline and whatnot. I mean, she had 72 little kids sitting there like that because we were afraid,
Yes,
but which is terrible. But the point is they also tried to get us to improve our weaknesses. It was always about improving the weaknesses rather than building the strengths.
yes,
And I feel like that very fundamental shift, as you earlier mentioned, find out what these kids and anybody in the community in general is good at. Let's build on our strengths, our brilliance,
absolutely.
use our brilliance, and then when we're aware of that as a community, we can match our skills with those of other people. And then we have that model of community and of building and of everyone using their strengths. But we do have to allow for those people who learn differently to be able to build their strengths in the
Absolutely.
ways that they can do that.
Absolutely, absolutely, because otherwise we're othering them and producing a disability culture rather than a different ability culture. I learn differently, but I bring all of this with me, which is possibly a role or a job or is something that someone else really dislikes, but I love it. And in fact, it's the only thing I love. So could you just let me do that, please? I
Yes.
don't see an issue with that. I really don't see the issue with I'd love to bring your awareness to the rest of the world and how other things work and everything else. But do we need more than an awareness of it? Until it hits us as a problem, we don't tend to have to dive into it, do we? And normally, if it's your problem, you're invested in diving in it. It's not difficult to learn it at that point because you're invested in it. You've already got the buy-in. You're there. So I just think that that must be a far I'm echoing this as home education now. So I never thought I would home educate. Not was not on my radar. It was definitely on my son's radar. And during the whole lockdown experience that most of the globe got to have, we saw a complete change in him. Now, the first was a dietary change that we needed to make because we'd been noticing things since he was pretty young with the gut. We've been noticing those things. And I've been wanting to address that and not knowing where to start. And COVID gave me the ability to seek out a nutritionist, get the information I needed and the time at home to start cooking from scratch. Absolutely everything, back to bone broths, the whole lot to reset his stomach. Within about 6 weeks, we had quite a different child on our hands, a much calmer child. Was that environment or was that food? I noticed that the bits that were causing him a lot of distress were his toileting habits. The need to rush to the toilet was causing anxiety. or he was anxious that he would always need to rush to the toilet. Whichever way around it was going, it was a thing in my home. It was a
Thing,
big
right?
thing.
That you have to address the
You
things.
have to address the thing, exactly that. This is the thing. So the thing that was showing itself was this gut upset. No traditional method of working out if there was food intolerances or anything else were giving us anything conclusive. So we went right the way back to basics with a nutritionist, safely detox the gut, and that was what changed. Was the thing was no longer a thing. So in that, the diet definitely had some support to offer us. Did the autism go away? No, it didn't. What it made was for what it gave us in purely in our situation. I'm not saying it's for everybody, but if you have a gut issue, maybe look at that as well. Um, that it was a place for us to start, and with him calmer, I could get to the child that lied behind the anxiety, that
Mm,
big wall that comes up that I'm so scared to make a mistake. I'm not doing anything because I'm terrified of making a mistake. I'm worried it's going to go wrong. And I'm so gripped by fear that I don't know which way to step. Now, if you've been there at any point in our lives, and I think some of us get to visit that, that really horrible place of where on earth do I go now? This is where he was without the tools and abilities. Where he built resilience was to come back to that and go through it of let's address the gut. Let's see if that's helping you here. Okay, so we're calmer. Now the next thing is you don't think you're achieving at school, but look at all the work you've done at home. Look at all of this. Look at where you're brilliant. Look at how you are with the dogs. Look at this, and let's focus on look at how well you catch a ball. Look at how fast you run. Look at bringing these into his world, into his environment, started to build the character. Now, then the pendulum swung all the way the other way, where he's now super confident and invincible. And we're like, now pendulum back this way. It's a learning process, isn't it, for everybody at that particular point? So, but it helped to start building him from what he knew and what he could do rather than purely focusing on this list of things that did not fit a system's requirements of sit still, because
mhm.
that wasn't going to happen.
Right.
Um, to constantly feel like a failure age 4 because you can't get on the rainbow because you can't sit still at sit still time. This is a challenging thing. So again, maybe our environments can look at the inclusivity of that if a child can be in school. And I really don't think mine could, to be honest with you. I think now it's a personal preference, but at the time he was in not able to be there without severe distress. And all of those warning signs were being missed. Not
Yeah.
because people wanted to miss it, but because we were caught up in the measuring that has to happen because the school's being graded. So the school's being graded, their assessments are being graded, the neurodiversity inclusion is being graded, and we're so lost on the grading, we miss the little kid that's in the middle here going, help, I'm really stuck.
So how do we then ensure that our kids are have the basics, I guess is what I'm saying. The basics, the fundamentals of functioning in the world. Like maybe basic math skills, basic English
Yeah.
skills, the basic things like that. Are we trying to do those things too early? Like, do we need to look at the earlier childhood education and go, let's concentrate on making this kid aware of his or her strengths. Let's focus on building for lack of a better term, the persona, the ego in a good way, the ego, a healthy ego for the child, and then we can talk about the basic things of learning but also accompanied by their strengths. Like teach it in the areas that they love. Like if
Yeah.
I know my grandkids and a lot they say this, which is kind of a cliche, but it seems to be a sort of a true one. A lot of autistic kids love trains. Okay, teach math with train schedules, like maybe that way.
Absolutely. We we made learning a life skills based
There.
effort. So we when we came right the way back, the first thing he was learning was nutrition. Inadvertently, he was learning about nutrition. And this is a very valuable thing. We're talking about processed foods, we're talking about the effects on our health. This is quite a big learning that doesn't make the curriculum so much, but is a fundamental part of life that he needed to understand to be able to manage his body and how his body responds to certain foods so that he could then be empowered to make those choices. That learning came back to application first. So it starts with interest. We, I think, we moved out of because we were having to stop work in the way that my husband and I had always worked and regroup to support our youngest son, to move him through that crisis, to help him have the tools to move through that crisis. We decided to rent out our home and move into a motorhome, drop our eldest at university, and take the youngest on an elongated trip away because he was terrified of the world at that point. And I needed to show him that this is a bigger world than the small island you grew up on. It's a bigger place. And as he got more resilient and more comfortable, we expanded that world. We built from that comfort level. So he wants to play and have adventures. Let's play and have an adventure. And then let's bring the bit in that he's terrified of with the full support of his parents right by his side to say, it's not so bad. Let me model mistakes for you. Let
Hmm.
me get horribly wrong and show you how we move through that. This is me burning dinner. This is me getting the wrong, putting my jumper on incorrectly. Silly mummy, learn to laugh at yourself as well. You don't have to measure everything as a pass or fail. You don't need to, and that is inadvertently what he had learned. Is that what was intended to be taught? No, I don't doubt that. But inadvertently, that lovely neurodivergent brain, that was the bit he learned that mistakes make
Hmm.
him a very bad person. And you're like, no, they don't. Mistakes are the very building blocks of learning. It's how we first learn what doesn't work.
I love this. Let me model mistakes for you. That is such an equalizer. First of all, in terms of teaching, I mean, if students see that their teacher makes mistakes, then okay, it's okay to make mistakes because that's how we learn.
Yeah,
Nobody does anything for the first time perfectly. You make a mistake and then you learn from that. You build on that. So
yeah,
I hate to say that we're going to have to wind up soon because, as I said, I could talk to you for 3 days. But
it's been great.
how do we give me, because I know this applies to so many of the systems, and perhaps this is where we draw the common thread, because
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about the navigating this in the justice system and in the health system and all of that. Do we start with asking questions? Where do we start to, as an advocate for a child, for changing a system, for whatever? Where can people start?
I, I with most of the time that I'm starting something new, it's got to align with who I am. And that can be as varied and different as we all are. I think we're all individuals bringing our own strengths. So coming back to your values and then the reason we do things to make sure we're in line with those, because they're the things I think we're out of line with. When I think about justice, policing used to be a service when I first joined. The fact that it's now a force, it's
Hmm.
not just a word that's changed, it's a culture that changed. That's more than a language change. That is that we're law enforcement, we are force, and this is suddenly an unapproachable, unwelcome space, whereas policing as a service reflects the community it serves, is part of the community it serves, doesn't fear the community that it's in any way, shape, or form. It's actually part of it. It understands it, it contributes to it, and then it brings a balance of social justice because those local community officers are the people with all the information about what's happening where and why. Yes, this is getting a bit heated over here. We're going to need a little bit of help at the moment because people are passionate about this subject in this area. So we need to get in here before it causes a problem. Let's get in, let's genuinely listen and hear what the issues are, and then look at how we meet the diverse population that we're now all a big part of. It's, everywhere. We have a diverse population, not just in neurodivergence, but in cultural divergence as well. So we need to be able to meet that without othering, without just making it, you're different to me, ergo, this is how we do it. If we keep that kind of rigidity, we're just going to miss so much richness that is available to us if we can't relax and pivot a little bit. With the more regulation that came in for policing, the less community centric it became, and suddenly it was a force.
Mhm.
We've forgotten how the power of restorative justice and this is where we signpost people now, is to a restorative justice, an incredibly powerful tool. If you're a child or a young person, or you do not have the awareness that what the action that you've taken actually caused harm. There are great ways of having, could you imagine if you've walked on someone's car, say overnight, you've damaged their car overnight. You've not thought about it. You might have had a few drinks, you might, but you've not really thought about it. And then you meet the car owner a week later, you don't feel so great about meeting the car owner and hearing the harm that was caused. Not only the cost of the damage, but the time it took to go and get the vehicle repaired. The wholeness of it comes out in a restorative environment, in restorative justice. At the moment, our justice system is you don't have to say anything
Hmm.
all the way through. In fact, you don't have to say anything. It does protect your rights, absolutely, not to incriminate yourself. But you don't have to say anything, does not confront the problem. The problem is still there. You could go all the way to the worst end of things. You could go all the way to prison having said nothing.
So,
That doesn't deal with the issue. And it echoes, I think, in our health environment where we've got certain health practices that are acceptable and certain health practices that aren't. And then we've also got the education environment where we've got a rigidity around practices, a rigidity around system instead of that flex. So,
mhm.
there are alternatives that are popping up all the time. And that's what we at Gemini Directions tend to signpost people to, is that you're in need of this, try here. Have a little look at this, explore for you and see if this is going to be a better outcome for you. It's bringing awareness, a more mainstream awareness to the
Mhm.
alternative provision that can be there.
So what I'm hearing is you really need to get clear on what your values are and what you are um, the way you want to live in this world, in this society. Get clear on your values, and then don't be afraid to ask questions and try to encourage some of that flexibility within a system that has always done it a certain way. Well, maybe now that way doesn't work for you, and it's okay to push back a little against that, but in a thoughtful, non-combative
Absolutely.
way. It doesn't have to
Yes.
be a fight. It needs to be a conversation. It needs to be a
Yes.
conversation that we have to
Yeah,
have.
we've had those conversations with a number of people across those fields now, where it's very clear that everybody in that service, in this respective service areas, is doing the very best they can with what they
Right.
have. And again, I've worked alongside an awful lot of these people. I'm well aware as how exhausted they are trying to make this work and still bringing the need of the child, the need of the other, the need of community. They're still trying to balance the books against all the odds that they're
Yes.
still doing
And
it.
it's a gargantuan job. But
Yes.
I do think that if you approach it with here's what I'm seeing in my child, is there a way that we can collectively maybe tweak this a little bit. Not monumental changes, but tweak this in such a way that it addresses some other needs.
Absolutely. And not to be afraid of stepping back and taking a more eagle-eyed view of it and saying, maybe this child isn't ready just yet. Maybe most 4-year-olds are, but this child won't be ready till they're 6 or 7, or they're going to show us signs that they're ready a little later, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know,
I
less
just
about
love
the
the idea
age.
of can we make it okay that you are who you are? That was one of the things I was scribbling here as you were speaking because it's just brilliant. We all have to learn to be okay with who we are and encourage our children to be who they are and serve them in that space.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh, I love this conversation. Amy, thank you
definitely.
so much for joining me today. I want you to tell everybody where they can learn more about you and where they can get your book and where they can reach you to get some of your brilliance and wisdom in Gemini directions when they need you.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. Well, we have a free book appointment button on the website at geminidirections.co.uk. And if you would like to work with me, you can explore that on that. It's not going to cost you anything. You can just explore it, see if we can signpost you to someone better or something more in line with your needs. So we're not here just to tout for your business or anything else. We are here to genuinely support you. And you don't have to pay anything for that call. My book is available on Amazon, The Magic of Not Fitting In. It gives you our story and it shows you where we started asking questions, just in case they echo for other people. So you don't feel alone if you're questioning what's happening and what to do next. It might help. I hope it does. Equally, we answer questions about that frequently.
I think that is
Just
a great place for people to start. So please, everybody, please look up Victoria Lenormand and check out both Gemini Directions and the Magic of Not Fitting In. This has been a brilliant conversation. I am so delighted that you joined me today. And if you all need a little bit more brilliance in your life, head on over to brilliantlyresilient.net. Sign up for our Brilliance Bits, of which Victoria will be a part when this episode airs. And I will see you all next time on the next episode of the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. Bye, everybody.
right.
And now I'm trying to find the stop recording. Here we go. All right. Thanks for tuning in to the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. Join our Facebook group and follow us on YouTube to be inspired with tools to reset, rise, and reveal your brilliance.